So let's continue this the education requirements to get your license. In the previous hour, we did talk about what the education requirements are for the associate license. Now we're looking at what the requirements are for the broker license, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, I think, in the previous hour. But you remember, you have to have your associate license for at least 5 years, right? Or at least 5 out of the last 7 years. And you must have to be active, have an active associate license for at least 5 of the last 7 years to be able to qualify to get your broker license. But what are the education requirements? There's another 60-hour course, which is really broke out into 2 different parts. There's a broker A, which is 30 hours, and then there's a broker B, which is another 30 hours. So that's would be 60 hours to get your broker license. Now, I don't know that they'll ask you questions like what I'm about to talk about on the exam, but I just want to make sure you're clear just in case they do. But obviously, to get your broker license, how many total hours of education would you be required to have? And the answer is 60, or not 60, 150 hours total. I apologize for that. But remember, you got to do the unit 1, that's 60 hours. Unit 2, that's 30 hours, so that's 90 hours with those 2. Then plus this 60 hours would give you 150 hours. So you have to have 150 hours to get your broker license. It was just 90 hours for an associate license. Okay? So hopefully I didn't confuse you too bad there. Now let's look at what the conditions are to get your license. Number 1, obviously you must pass the exam within 12 months of applying. So you submit your application to the Real Estate Commission. Eventually, hopefully they'll approve it within the next week or 2 of you submitting your application. But then you can go ahead and schedule the state exam. But what they're saying here, you have to pass it within 12 months. So, and I get people ask me all the time, well, how many times can you take it? As many times as you can afford to take it within 12 months of applying. Okay? So be careful. First of all, I don't think should take anybody that long to pass the test. But if you do not pass within the 12 months, then you will have to reapply. You got to redo your application. You got to submit another application. I'm sure it's not because they just want you to pay an additional fee to make money on it. But they will require you to resubmit the application to take it after 1 year. But then you'll notice here it says, as long as it hasn't been more than 3 years since you took the course. And this is something I might need to correct from the previous hour, and I'm not sure if I said this or not, but I may have indicated that any of these licensing courses are good for 5 years. If I said that, we need to change it. So let's change that right now. Because it used to be 5 years. They have now changed it to 3 years. So that's what you need to remember. And I'm pretty sure that's what's in the book. I know it is. But it seems like I may have misspoken in the previous hour. But just in case I did, I want to clarify it right now. All education courses are good for 3 years. So you would not have to retake the classes as long as it's been within the last 3 years. You just have to resubmit your application to take the exam if you have not passed after 1 year. But then in paragraph 3, it says you must apply for your license within 1 year of passing the exam. I don't know why it'd take anybody a year to apply for the license, but I guess some do. But you remember, once you complete this course, Unit 1, you can go ahead and take the state exam. You do not have to complete Unit 2 before you take the exam. It's just you cannot get your license until you complete Unit 1 and Unit 2. So in essence, you've got up to a year to go ahead and get the Unit 2 behind you and then apply for your license. If you don't do that, you'll be taking that exam all over again. If you don't apply for your license within a year. So we don't want that to happen. But just as a reminder, why not during that week or maybe 2 weeks you're waiting to take the exam after you finish this class, go ahead and get the Unit 2 out of the way. Go ahead and knock it out. Once a really good review for the state exam, and then by the time you finish the exam, now you've completed both classes and can go ahead and get your license. We got money to make here. Let's get her done. We don't want to be waiting around. And then number 4, here saying, if you submit your application and you're denied the right to get your license, then it says you must wait a minimum of 24 months to reapply. And I get that question I get all the time here. Well, why in the world would they deny you the right to take the exam or the right to get your license? Typically, the only thing I can think is something came back in your background check that the Real Estate Commission would have a problem with. I will tell you, just because you may have something on your background check, from a year or years ago or whatever, don't let that stop you from applying here. Because I'm just telling you, I know of some people that they've got a police record, but they were still allowed to take the exam and get their license. So I can't tell you exactly what would or where that line is, where they'll say, all right, no, you can't get your license. But for now, just know, and for test purposes, if you are denied, you must wait at least 24 months before you can reapply. And so there you go. All right. Now we look at what the requirements are for broker in charge license requirements. Now, paragraph A, and this is cut and paste straight from the law, and to me it seems like this is not written very clearly, but it's cut and paste from the law. So let's look and see what it says, and then we'll discuss it. But it says, to be the broker in charge, number 1, you must have ownership interest in the company or be actively engaged in the operation and management of the company. Just the way that reads kind of suggests as long as I meet either 1 or 2, then I can be broker in charge. Now keep in mind, this is kind of making the assumption you already have your broker's license, right? You've completed all 150 hours of required education. You've passed a broker's exam and you have your broker's license. Well, once you get your broker license, then some may decide to actually become broker in charge and actually manage and run an office or company. And that's what we're talking about here. To go from broker to broker in charge. And to be the broker in charge, you must comply and meet number 2. You will be actively engaged in the operation and management of the company. That one is not an option. There's no way you can be in charge and not be engaged in the management of the company. So that one's not an option. The only one that's really an option is number 1. Do you have to own the company to be the broker in charge of the company? No. In fact, I'd say most brokers in charge do not own the company. But whoever does own the company has hired a broker in charge to run it, manage it, and so forth. So I just want to be clear. Number 1, A1 there is an option. That's optional. A2 is not an option. So in case I just want to make sure we don't misread what that's saying. All right, paragraph B, says the associate license or broker license must be licensed under a broker in charge. And y'all, obviously, if you're not the broker in charge, meaning you have an associate license or just a broker's license, then you must be licensed under a broker in charge. Y'all, in fact, I better pause a second to make sure we're clear on this. Y'all, there's a difference between a broker's license and a broker in charge. That's two different licenses. Sometimes just the way we kind of talk out on the street, we kind of, it almost sounds like broker in charge is the same thing, and it's not. I may come up to you and say, well, who is your broker? Well, obviously I'm referring to who is your broker in charge, okay? But y'all, there are a lot of licensees out there with a broker's license. Y'all, it says broker, but it does not say broker in charge. Y'all, again, those are two different licenses. And the point they're trying to make here, if you do not have a broker in charge license, then you must be licensed under a broker in charge. So whether you have an associate license, which is what you're going to be getting here hopefully soon, or later you may decide to get your broker's license, you still have to be licensed under a broker in charge. And you can never work for more than one broker in charge at a time. You'll see that coming up later, but just thought I'd throw it in there. And then paragraph C, it just says, must notify the commission within 5 days if the broker in charge becomes disassociated with the company. Honestly, I'm not sure I understand why it says 5 days. But that's what the law says, so that's what we're going to put out there. Because see, what's going to happen here, and this happens a lot, typically a broker in charge, especially if it's not your own company, they don't tend to stay more than 2 or 3 years. You tend to see them rotated in and out. For whatever reason, they kind of pull one out and put a new broker in charge in. And when that happens, obviously the person going in as the new broker in charge, they have to go to the real estate commission and get their broker license upgraded to broker in charge. So their license will actually now say broker in charge. Well, the broker in charge is coming out of that position, then he's going to have to basically turn in his broker in charge license to get his broker license. So you got to replace one license with a new license. And I'm not real sure why it says the person coming out, because if you're disassociated with the company, that means you're the outgoing broker in charge. You now have 5 days, according to the law, you have 5 days to let the commission know what you're going to do. Well, here's what I'm just assuming they're talking about here. Is it possible that there's still going to be a broker in charge, but of a different office or maybe even a different company completely? They can. Or maybe they decide, I'm not going to be a broker in charge anymore at all. I'm just going to revert back to being a broker. Well, you got 5 days to decide what you're going to do. Let the commission know so they can reissue you whichever license will be necessary for whatever you decide to do. I hope that makes sense. But I wouldn't worry about getting into the weeds here. If they ask you anything about this, then obviously, according to the law, the outgoing broker in charge has 5 days to notify the commission that they're no longer in charge of that office or that company. Here's what I'm now going to do. All right, moving on. Now let's talk about renewing your license and what the conditions are to renew it. Obviously, again, states got to make some more money here, right? And the way they make money is they require you to renew your license. Once you get it, then every 2 years, you will have to renew your license. And you're going to see here in just a minute, the requirement is that every licensee must renew their license every 2 years by June 30th. So every 2 years by June 30th, you got to renew your license. Well, there are some conditions you got to meet in order to renew your license, and that's what we're going to look at right here. And depending on the type of license you have will depend on what the conditions are. So what we're looking at right now is the conditions if you have a broker license or an associate license. Notice this is not for brokers in charge. Broker or associate license, one says you're going to have to do another background check every third renewal period. Now remember I said how long is one renewal period? 2 years. So I got to renew every 2 years by June 30th. Okay? So every third renewal period would be basically every 6 years. You have to undergo or submit to another background check. In addition to that, you're going to have to complete some continuing education or CE. And the requirement is you must complete a minimum of 10 hours of continuing education every 2 years. Now you'll notice on the slide, and I'm sure I've got it in the book as well, but something I want you to pay attention to here. You notice, in fact, look at the statement in that second bullet where it says must complete 10 hours of CE biannually. I want you to pay attention to that word biannually. This will cause you a problem on the exam if you don't listen to what I'm telling you. If you look at the word biannually, I want you to pay more specific attention to the third letter, E, biannually. Well, what does biannually mean? It means every 2 years. So that's what I'm saying. You got to renew your license by June 30th every 2 years. That's what biannually means. Well, what if I took the E out and replaced it with an A? Now the word would say biannually. Pay attention. So what does biannually mean? Twice a year. So, my point is, on the exam, they'll probably ask you, how often do you have to take CE, or how much do you have to take? And one, maybe two of your answers will say biannually. You got to take 10 hours biannually, which is the right answer. But you may have one or two options that says you got to complete it biannually. So now you're not just paying attention to trick words in a question. Now you got to pay attention to trick letters in a question. So y'all pay attention to that, because I'm telling you on the exam, biannually and biannually look very similar, and I'm afraid a lot of times we don't notice what they've done here and select the wrong answer. So just be careful. Now, of the 10 hours that we have to complete, there must be a minimum of 4 hours included that cover mandated topics. When I say mandated topics, is license law update. That's what these mandated topics are all about. So you got to take 10 hours total, but 4 of those 10 hours must cover mandated topics. License law updates is what they're talking about. So in fact, we typically kind of break it down this way. We know we got 10 hours total to take, but of those 10, we got 4 hours of core, which means core is mandatory. You must take this 4-hour course, whatever that course is during that renewal period. But then the remaining 6 hours would be considered elective courses, training. And any elective classes, you can just pick and choose, as long as they've been approved by the commission. You can pick and choose whatever classes you want to take. Obviously at our Real Estate School for Success, we've got a bunch of continuing education classes you can take, whether it be in person or the same way you're doing it right now. You can do it online. But you can pick and choose which classes you want to take. We got some 2-hour classes and we got some 4-hour classes. So you just choose which classes you want to take. Obviously, make sure they add up to at least 10 hours. But just make sure also that, of that 10 hours, you also take the 4-hour mandated course. You got to do that. That's a requirement. Now, the conditions to renew a broker in charge license. There's some similarities here, but really one big difference if you're a broker in charge. Obviously, they must also do a background check every third renewal period. They also have to do 10 hours of CE, again, biannually. But if you're a broker in charge, you don't have just 4 hours of core. You actually have 8 hours that are mandatory. The first 4 hours is the same mandated course that everybody else has to take. So every licensee will have to take the 4-hour mandated course. But then there's also a 4-hour broker in charge course. And every broker in charge must take those 2 classes every renewal period. No ifs, ands, and buts. So basically, as a broker in charge, you have 8 hours of core or mandatory classes. The broker in charge only has 2 hours of elective credit that they could take. That's the difference between broker in charge and associate versus broker license, okay? So, they're going to test you on this stuff, so just make sure you get it. Hopefully that was clear. Next thing we look at are some exemptions. Imagine that. Again, every good law we ever have, they got to throw in some that are exempt from having to comply with the law. And continuing education is no different. There are some that are exempt, does not have to comply. Well, let's look at them. Any licensee completing a post-license course during that renewal period. For example, once you've had your license long enough, maybe you decide to get your broker license. So obviously you're going to have to take the broker course. Well, remember that broker course is a 60-hour course, and that's considered a post-licensing course. Well, that 60-hour course is a lot more than the 10 hours that's required for continuing ed. So in essence, the law was saying if you do the broker course, you can substitute that and be exempt from any other continuing ed classes. Okay? In paragraph B, any licensee on inactive status is exempt. I'm going to talk more about that here in just a minute, so I'm not going to get into the details right there, because we're going to be talking more about inactive status here, I think, in the next slide. But just know anybody that has an inactive license would be exempt from continuing education. Okay. Paragraph C, licensees that have 25 years of licensure and 65 years of age get a full exemption. Now, what we're talking about right here, there are some licensees that qualify for a full exemption, and full meaning you do not have to take any continuing education at all. You're totally exempt from any continuing education. That's what the full exemption means. Well, who gets the full exemption? You got to have an active license for 25 years and 65 years of age. So, you can't just have one or the other. You have to have both. You have to have a lot of experience and be old. Okay, just one or the other is not going to cut it. But then in paragraph D, here's describing those that might qualify for a partial exemption. Now, first of all, what does partial mean? Partial means, obviously, I'm exempt from part of the continuing ed requirements. And the part that you would be exempt from would be any elective credit hours. You would not have to take any elective, but you still have to take any core requirement, y'all, the mandatory training. So what are the requirements to get a partial exemption? You just have to be licensed for 25 years. So if you're licensed for 25 years and you're only 50 years of age, then you don't qualify for a full exemption yet. But with that 25 years licensure, you do get the partial exemption, which means you only have to take the core or mandatory classes. Remember, if you have an associate license or a broker license, it's just a 4-hour core mandatory class on mandated topics. But if you are a broker in charge, remember, now you have 8 hours of core, because you got to take the 4-hour mandatory training plus the 4-hour broker in charge course. So in essence, the broker in charge is only exempt for 2 hours to get that partial exemption. Okay. Now let's talk about some more of this continuing ed. In paragraph C, here it says if you're a broker or associate who takes more than the required hours during the 2-year period. We know we're required to take 10 hours, but let's say you wind up taking 12 hours. Well, here is saying that anything you do over the requirement, in this case, to be 2 hours over, you can actually carry that 2 hours into the next period. In fact, it says you can carry up to 4 hours of elective credit into the next period. That's a new change in the law, which I think will be very useful. Because sometimes, if you take 3 4-hour classes, well, that's 12 hours right there, right? So that's more than the 10 hours required. Well, at least now you get to carry over. So all that's good. That's good stuff. So I remember, you can carry up to 4 hours of elective credit. Obviously not core classes, but you can carry 4 hours of elective over into the next renewal period if you take more than what was required. And then D, if the criminal background check is not provided. Remember, how often do you have to do the background check? Every 3rd renewal period, which is every 6 years. You got to do the background check, and if you don't get that background check complete, if it doesn't come back completed, by June 30th. So obviously, especially in that 3rd renewal period, you better not wait too late to do the renewal. I'd do it a couple months before June 30th, just to make sure I don't run into any problems. But if June 30th rolls around and that background check is not completed, not that you just applied for it, until it's completed, then you will have to put your license on inactive status. Again, we're getting ready to talk about this inactive status, but I will just tell you for now, just know inactive means it's not active. Also means you cannot be practicing real estate. Okay? Not within an inactive license. So here we go. Let's talk about this inactive license. I'm going to tell you, this is actually a good status for a lot of people. What you may find, and a lot of you will know exactly what I'm talking about very soon. It seems like a lot of people, they get their real estate license, and then life just totally gets in the way. Whether it be maybe you've got another job that you're having to deal with, or family issues, and just stuff going on in your life that prevents you from being able to really do any real estate. You just don't have time to really practice real estate. Well, one of the things you may discover, when you get your license, it's not that cheap to have a real estate license. Depending on the company you decide to hang your license with will have a lot to do with what I'm getting ready to bring up. But there are fees associated with having to have a license. Different companies charge different fees. There's some monthly fees, there may be some quarterly fees, or even annual fees. But what you may start experiencing is, I can't afford to keep paying all these fees, and I don't even have time to do real estate. If you find yourself in that situation, do not just give up your license and turn it in. Don't do, you work too hard to get it. Rather, an option you have, you can actually take your license to the real estate commission and ask them to put your license on inactive status, and they'll do that. Now again, if it's inactive, then you cannot be practicing real estate. You cannot receive any kind of compensation from real estate, from any kind of real estate deal. Whether it be referral, you can't do anything. For all intents and purposes, while it's sitting on inactive status, you're no longer licensed. Okay? Now, how long can it be inactive? Indefinitely. The only requirement to keep your license inactive is just to pay the renewal fee every 2 years. That's it. And it's not, that renewal fee is not that much, like $25 or something like that. But just renew your license every 2 years, and you can keep it on inactive status indefinitely. You might decide to come back 10 years from now, or 20 years, or 30 years from now. Say, you know what? Things are a lot different right now in my life, and I'd like to go back. I'd like to try this real estate again. Well, as long as you put your license inactive, now all you got to do is go to the commission and say, look, I know I've got my license on inactive. I would now like to put it back on active status so I can start practicing real estate again. And then there's no more, you don't have to take this class again. You don't have to take the state exam again. Just put it inactive and let it sit there. So the good news is, while it's inactive, again, for all intents and purposes, you're no longer licensed, so there are no fees you have to pay other than the renewal fee every 2 years. That is the only fee you would ever have to pay while it's inactive. All these other fees would go away. All right. So what's it saying in A1? There are some restrictions, which I kind of already talked about a lot of this, but if you're inactive, you cannot be practicing real estate. You cannot be working with buyers and sellers. You cannot do referrals. You cannot receive compensation of any type if it's inactive. And then in paragraph 2, if you ever need to verify the status of your license, obviously you can go on the Real Estate Commission's website. They got a link there called licensee lookup or something like that. You can look up your license status, and it'll tell you whether you're in active status or inactive status or whatever. There's actually 5 different statuses, and we're getting ready to talk about those. But in paragraph 3, it's talking about changing your license classification. It says if you're seeking to change your classification, you must adhere to the procedures by the commission. In other words, you have to go online and submit the application. Okay? It's not much to it. It's just not much to the document, but you can go ahead and submit it and have it, and then they'll go ahead and reclassify it if you want to put it inactive or whatever. But then in paragraph 4, to reactivate, in other words, you decide at some point in the future to take it off inactive and put it back on active. It says licensee must meet the reactivation requirements prescribed. And what they're talking about here, the only requirement to take it off inactive and put it back on active, if it's been inactive for more than 2 years, any amount over 2 years, then you would have to complete 10 hours of continuing education to put it back on active status. And again, don't have people keep getting confused. Well, if it's been 10 years, does that mean every 2 years I have to do 10 hours? No. It's just any amount of time it was inactive that was over 2 years, you got to do 10 hours of CE. So maybe it's been inactive for 20 years. All you have to do is take 10 hours of CE, and they'll put it back on active status, and you can just take off like you never had it inactive to start with. Okay. The renewal procedure, what they're saying here is, typically the commission will send you an email 3 or 4 months prior to June 30th, giving you a heads up. You got to renew your license by June 30th this year. Don't forget. Well, but they're also saying that, this email they send you is just a courtesy. They don't have to do that. And you cannot, if you don't get the email, you cannot use that as an excuse as to why you did not renew. So if you didn't get renewed by June 30th, now your license is considered lapsed. That's the third status, right? We've talked about active, we talked about inactive, and now you see the lapsed. If you do not renew your license by June 30th for whatever reason, it's now considered lapsed, and obviously, you cannot be practicing real estate. The only status you can be practicing real estate in must have an active license. Now, it does say here that, if your license does lapse because you failed to renew, you can still renew the license for up to 24 months. You got 2 years to still come back and renew the license. But what you need to understand here, once it lapses, not only do you have to pay the renewal fee, now you're having to pay late fees. And I will also tell you, every day that your license is lapsed, that late fee is going to get a little bit higher. So I'm telling you, you wait 2 years to renew a lapsed license, that's going to be a pretty expensive late fee for you. So don't want to be paying late fees anyway. And you better not be practicing real estate or receiving any kind of compensation during the time that it is lapsed. Big problems you're going to incur there if that happens. If you do not renew the license after the 24th month, then your license is now considered canceled. If you don't renew it, it's just going to be canceled. Now, if it's canceled, you're not getting it back without starting all over again. You have to take all these classes again. You got to take the exam again. We don't want to do all that. So again, you work too hard to get it. If for some reason now's not a good time to practice real estate, once you get your license, just put it on inactive status, pay the renewal fee, and let it sit there until you're able to come back and play with it again. All right. Now we look at what the property manager or property manager in charge requirements are. You ought to get one of those licenses, and you'll notice it's the exact same thing in terms of the licensing requirements. I say pretty close. You got to be 21 years of age to be a property manager in charge, or 18 years of age just to be a property manager. Again, you still got to provide all your contact information. If it changes, make sure you notify them within the 30 days. You got to have a high school diploma or GED. Complete the education requirements for a property manager. We're getting ready to talk about what that is. They also have to do a background check and pass the state exam. Y'all went through that kind of quick because it's the same thing as what you saw for the associate license. But here's the education requirements for property managers. This is just a 30-hour course that must be completed. So 30 hours of classroom training. Again, unless you have a 4-year degree in law or real estate, then you could waive the classroom training, but you'd still have to be able to pass that exam, the state exam we're talking about. And then to be a property manager in charge. Now this is a good bit different than the requirements to be a broker in charge. So be careful with this. But once you get your property manager's license, do the 30-hour class, take the state exam, get your property manager's license. From that point, the only thing you have to do now to be a property manager in charge is there is a 7-hour property manager in charge course, a 1-day class. So you'd have to complete that 1-day class, and then just apply to be property manager in charge. Now, you remember to go from associate to broker or broker in charge, you got to be an associate for 5 years. To go from property manager to property manager in charge, basically 1 day. So I can get my property manager's license today, take that 7-hour property manager in charge course tomorrow, and then get my property manager in charge license, which is, that's crazy as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, property managers, just like associates or broker, if you're not in charge, then you must be licensed under someone in charge. But property managers must be licensed under a property manager in charge or a broker in charge. Now, I don't know how big a deal this would be for test purposes, but just to be clear, if I'm a broker in charge, I can hire on associate licensees, broker licensees, and property managers. Because as a broker in charge, I can do all the above. But if I'm a property manager in charge, management's all you can do. You cannot do sales with a property manager license. So a property manager in charge can hire property managers, but they could not hire sales associates or brokers and stuff like that. Okay. And then the investigations. I don't know why A is such a big deal but anyway, all investigators must have a minimum of 100 hours of training. So they just want you to know that any investigators that come out to investigate, they are well trained. They know what they're doing. Paragraph B, I would certainly remember this one. The commission can issue restraining orders. Not only can they will. They do it all the time. If, for example, if you were to find out that a transaction you were involved with is now going to be investigated for some reason, there might be a temptation for you and maybe other parties involved might say, hey, look, we all need to get together before the investigator comes out. Let's get together so we can make sure we get our story straight here. That's a no-no. So what the commission will do, they will issue a restraining order saying you cannot discuss or communicate in any manner with anybody associated with this transaction until after we've concluded the investigation. I remember that. For some reason, they like to ask you about that. But that is something the Real Estate Commission not only can do, they will do, issue restraining orders. But then it says the investigator must conclude their investigation within 150 days. That's 5 months. That's a long time to investigate. And D is just saying, as a licensee, you may consider voluntarily surrendering your license. In other words, if you know you're wrong, you did something you shouldn't have done, which is probably going to cost you your license anyway. There's an option here where you could just basically surrender your license and forego the investigation, which may not be a bad idea if you know you've done wrong. And you're going to see why I say that right here. Because here we look at what the disciplinary actions could be. And I would absolutely remember everything on this slide. The commission can impose a fine of anywhere between $500 right on up to $10,000 per violation. That's a lot of money. And my guess is if they come out to investigate, they're going to find more than one violation. So you're looking at potentially up to $10,000 per violation. But this next bullet you might want to be careful with. If you force the investigation to take place and they can prove you were wrong, you were guilty of whatever, then it says the commission will also recover the cost of the investigation. This is on top of the fine. You got any idea what it might cost to pay an investigator to investigate for up to 5 months, y'all, that could be a very expensive ordeal, y'all, which is why I was saying, y'all, just a little bit earlier, y'all, if you know you're wrong, it might not be a bad idea to just say, you know what, I made a mistake and I was wrong. Let's not do this investigation. Let's just see how we can work this thing out some other way, which is what that third bullet is saying.